Media 2.0, one show, many platforms. And this is a session we've done actually for a couple of years because the topic just doesn't go away. We're in an emerging, multi-screen, multi-dimensional world, and it's challenging everybody in that value chain to keep up with change. Whether you're an established production distribution company that are constantly having to revamp your processes, or you're a new media company finding your way into, and in some cases, changing those processes. So what we want to explore in the next 50 minutes or so is how, in this world of Media 2.0, in-house distribution departments, service providers, and their broadband media partners are coping with these new demands. To address that topic, we have quite a murderer's row of experts here for you. Starting at that far end, we have Joel Nirenberg, who's Vice President of Product Management at ScheduAll. And Joel, could you just take a minute, tell us a little bit about ScheduAll so we understand the context you're bringing to this?
ScheduAll is a provider of software for the broadcast and media industries to do everything having to do with content, managing the manipulation of content. Where people touch content, that's where we get involved. Everything from the original conception through to the creation, manipulation, post-production, all the way through to broadcast, transmission, and eventual delivery. So we certainly have a hand, I guess, in all of the aspects of this particular topic, not only from our own perspective, but also in terms of assisting our clients in managing that process.
Okay, thank you. Seated next to Joel is O'Brien McKinley, who's a Senior Director at Globecomm Systems. And O'Brien, can you tell us a little bit about that company?
Sure, thanks Robert. Globecomm Systems started out as a satellite provider. We've grown significantly over the years from just one teleport facility to multiple teleports across the world. Combining that with a systems integration for turnkey operations from start to finish, Globecomm is a best-of-breed solutions provider for system integration with one of our recent developments in the past few years of hosting a small little network called Showtime. In our Hauppauge location up on Long Island, we provide all of the infrastructure, including uplink, as well as VOD delivery for the network.
Thank you, O'Brien. Turning to my other side, I'd like to introduce Greg Philpott, who's the founder and president of a company called mDialog. And Greg, could you tell us about that?
Sure. mDialog provides broadcasters and operators with the technology and the tools they need to deliver a TV commercial experience in connected devices. So multi-mid-roll interactive advertising and video advertising in OTT devices, smartphones, tablets. We try to bring the everywhere to TV everywhere revenue models.
Thank you. And lastly, seated next to him is Ashley Blackmon. She is the Senior Director for CNN's Image and Sound Production Services at Turner Broadcasting. And could you, well, we don't really need to be told what you do, but could you talk a little bit about about CNN's Image and Sound Group?
Sure. I hope you all do know CNN. What we do in our department is video end-to-end, and what I mean by that is from the point we bring it in, whether we bring it in from a satellite or from a file transfer, to the output for the organization from our many distribution channels, whether it's a network or a broadband or online, our department moves that content through the whole process.
Thank you. Could you all hear all of that? Anybody need to be louder?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Nobody's.
Yeah, they're in the back.
Somebody's. So who needs to be? Everybody needs to be louder. Okay. Well, to the extent that we can avoid feedback, we will boost everybody up just a little bit. Thank you. Okay. And once I find my notes, gosh, it's all going to go a lot better. Yeah. I was so prepared too. There we go. Okay. So. For a major program provider today, whether it's a BBC or a CNN or an HBO and an ESPN, how many different formats are they currently presenting their content in, and what are they? And let's start with somebody who has to actually produce those. Ashley.
Yeah. We produce an HD for CNN Domestic. We produce an HD for also HLN. For CNN International, we still produce an SD content for all of the streams that we use out of there. When we move the content to online, it is actually a different sizing and a formatting to put that content out to the web services. as we take those steps into the TV everywhere to move things into the on-demand process, there's still yet another format that has to be converted to get it to the on-demand for Comcast and services like that. So then there's the still images that we have to transfer, because when you look at it on your iPhone or your iPad, you first see a still that has to be sized appropriately for the device that you're on. Whether it's your big screen or your little device, those things all have to be taken into consideration and done for the different devices.
Wow. How about in the world of mDialog, but you've got a lot of formats to deal with as well?
Yeah, basically the room that we play in is something called HTTP live streaming, which is a streaming protocol for connected devices like iPads, but it's actually being rapidly adopted by, for example, the latest Android Honeycomb will support HLS. Smartphones, the Roku, for example, you can deliver a live or on-demand signal to OTT devices like Roku. And so one of the kind of the peculiarities of HLS is it's something known as an adaptive bitrate stream. So it's essentially one stream, but it's really composed of n number of bit rates and resolutions, and the player just switches them based on the heuristics for its network connection. So in our world, you have this one stream manifest, but it's describing anything from 64K audio only all the way up to HD, and then you kind of execute logic both in the cloud and in the device to say, hey, that's Roku, we should go up to HD on that. But the audience in the device has very little, they're the consumers of all of this. So what's kind of strange is there's tons of different profiles, tons of different bit rates, but it's all bundled into a single stream that goes up and down.
Doesn't that sound nice, Ashley? Don't you wish your life looked like that?
It's not that simple, I don't believe.
Jumping, Joel, your company has to, of course, deal with all of this stuff as it's being managed in the workflow. What are you seeing in terms of formats?
Well, you know, we've been hearing an awful lot from our clients, particularly the broadcasters, regarding the various different formats that are available. I mean, yes, of course, there's SD, there's HD, there's 3D, there's 720, 1080, and that's just, you know, the broadcast formats as opposed to all of the other streaming formats, the handheld formats, and part of what the challenge, I think, for our what people are seeing in the industry is the fact that there are so many. I mean, it's the real basis behind your question, Robert. There are so many different formats. There are so many different platforms, and how do you keep up with all of them? I was told by just recently, a few weeks ago, by a program manager at Australian Broadcasting Corporation. He did a count of the number of HD formats alone and came up with some number like 26. So how do you manage those varying different formats? How do you take advantage of the fact that some of them have clear pros versus others? And how do you take deal with the fact that there are incompatibilities, obviously, that you then need to deal with? That's something I'm sure that you deal with all the time. But there's no easy answer to it, other than the fact that you have to live with it, incorporate it somehow into your workflow, and recognize what your audiences are for each individual format, as well as who your providers are going to be.
You know, Brian, as a service provider, quite frankly, it sounds to me impossible. I mean, how do you deal with it?
Well, let me go from one extreme to another. One of the hosted services that we provide for Showtime, they have just under 4 services to include, you know, various soups and sources of HD, and then still SD, and then upconvert. But then on the other extreme, a pro football television network, let's call it, they do 22 formats. That includes anything from MOV on ingest to HD to SD, DB25, and everything in between, because they cannot say no to get that clip. It's all about the money shot from the sideline. So what we have to do as the service provider is to provide that, let's call it a ubiquitous platform, and that's what we're trying to do, is that one essence can play out to the multiple platforms that we have to deal with. On that note, I was just at a partners meeting with Cisco, and interestingly on that, as I was talking about earlier this morning, Last year at CES, there were 2 to 3 platforms that were introduced as far as tablet platforms for the TV Anywhere experience. This year, there were 70 some odd tablets that were introduced, and the majority of those tablets had different operating systems or DRMs in the background for the content to be delivered to. So, like you said, Robert, it's almost impossible. But it's still, you know, we have to deliver on time, under budget, and on time.
Actually, if I could just expand on that, the other issue then becomes not only the challenge of trying to deal with all of those varying formats, but to do so in an environment where you're expected to constrain your costs, because we are in a tight economy and we're trying to do more with less. But somehow or another, we need to have both the resource power and the technology to be able to manipulate all of these various formats and to move in and out amongst them all.
It sounds like the old days of automobiles when each car maker decided where they were going to put the accelerator, the brake, and the clutch, which must have made it really thrilling to be on the road sometime in your borrowed car. To what extent, this is almost a philosophical question, and I just wonder if I could have a little bit more volume, but I guess not. To what extent do the different formats require the content owners to rethink how their product is consumed and then customize it to be effective in that format? Because of course it's a completely different experience watching it on a 2-inch screen or watching it on a big screen. We'll start with you.
Well, what our customers are coming to us for is let's say if we take tablets and smartphones, there's kind of 2 experiences there that's really popular right now. One, it's either on demand, so it's catch up, it's full episodic content that they want to long form, but they want to monetize that with multi-mid-roll ad insertion, and the opportunity is these are uniquely addressable devices now, so you can really deliver a more targeted ad unit, sell it at a higher rate, so that's kind of all good. But then the other kind of opportunity that we're seeing is using the tablet as a second screen device. So you're in the living room, and what ABC did with the Oscars this year, where they had a second screen device, the goal was to be watching it in the living room. You had the iPad or the iPhone in your hand, but you had 11 alternate camera angles. And so if you can imagine if you were them, you would now, after that, you would have a lot of data points that they wouldn't have otherwise about when did people start watching and which time zones did what, and was the iPhone more popular than the iPad, even though there's a 10x difference in them in the marketplace, etc. So there's when it comes to IP delivered or connected devices in our world, the 2 opportunities is either to augment the living room, or it's live and on demand, where either you can't be in the living room, or it's a household like mine and there's teenage daughters and no one wants to watch the same thing at the same time.
Well, and beyond just the format, it's also about the content. Our viewers, when they watch something on a tablet device or at their desk, are not going to want to watch the same thing that they see on television. Yeah. They want to see something different. They want to see different images. They're going to be engaged about something that is different from what they've seen on television. So that is a big concern for us as well, is how do we only go out and shoot the content 1 or 2 times, right, and not have to go out over and over again to bring back content and then repurpose it for an audience that will be HLN, which wants one thing, versus an online viewer, versus an international audience. So beyond just the format that we have to put it out in, whether it's Flash, HTML5, or whatever for the web and so on, it's also about what they want to see and capture. So how do you produce it as few times as possible to move that content out, to make it an enriching experience for the viewer?
Ashley, could you give an example of the difference between content that's for your online audience and for your regular linear audience?
Sure. I'll take a kind of an easy one. Junkets, right? People go out and we shoot the celebrities talking about their movies. Well, what you would do in a TV audience, you have an anchor who can come on and talk about what celebrity X just said and put that in there. When you're putting it up as a piece of video out of the hundreds of things that there are to watch, it has to be fun. It has to be a little bit more engaging. It has to tell you something that you might not have gotten from the anchor who's also reading the copy that goes along with it. So you're going to produce it in a bit of a different fashion. You're going to try and add something that brings you into the story and makes you watch it for the 2 or 3 minutes that you're there. Whereas in the TV experience, it can be a little bit more straightforward. You've got somebody to talk about it. You may have some of your anchors and talent doing their yip-yap before and after it, right, to engage you into the one thing that the person said. So you're doing that without the advantage of those anchors engaging you. You're having to do it with just the interview at a junket, which is very formal in the structure.
Greg, that makes me want to ask the same question about advertising. It's got to be different in different devices.
It is. I think what we're seeing is that they want to I mean, you also, costs are very important. So the brands would like to take that 30-second spot and deliver it here because it's a gorgeous screen on a tablet, for example, and the viewing distance is about maybe 10 inches, but you now have this opportunity to make it a lean forward experience by either the way we see it a lot is that you're enhancing the experience. So much to what you're saying, you want to enhance the audience experience, and in the ad case, you might have a 30-second car spot that has a call to action that can appear as an overlay, that if the audience takes that action, it was a 30-second kind of traditional auto spot. Now they're maybe doing a 360 or booking a test drive or otherwise engaging in the brand. And while they're doing that, you can stop the video playback. Of course, it's all addressable and measurable. So in that case, the audience turned the 30-second spot perhaps into a 2.5-minute spot, which brands love. The programmers can obviously sell at a higher rate, and they get a lot of data points around it. And it's engaging. The opportunity to interact with a tablet is maybe a 1/16 of an inch for your thumb if it's compelling.
And I think also you'll find that my experience has been that in that type of environment, you're also providing more direct value to the advertiser as well, because you know that you've got a more engaged audience. You don't have somebody who might have the TV on, may be in the room, may not be in the room, and so forth. I mean, a good example, if you're going to tailor the actual content to that audience, a good example was a couple of years ago, I think it's a classic example, the Apple, hello, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC ads, the broadcast ads, and they came out with a set of internet spots that were banner ads essentially. You would click through to see them, but the content was completely different. It was very clever because it was directly related to the fact that you were watching this literally on a web page, and you knew that you not only had an audience, you had an engaged audience.
And a measurable audience.
Is everybody hearing Joel
right,
okay?
exactly.
I just want to make sure you can hear him because I'm having a little trouble. Yes? No? Mezzo. If you could boost Tim Bolden, that'd be good. Sorry. You. All right, what do you got to say?
Now it gets fun.
Well, I think we've touched on various points here, but conglomerate, brand protection, cost efficiency. Okay. In the conglomerate sense, brand protection and brand identity, because obviously you don't want that lower third CNN bug or HLN bug on crappy video. Let's be quite honest. You do not want that. So that's the other aura that we have to deal with in this broadcast workflow. So the convergence of all of this media, in addition with the processing power that has to go on behind the scenes, which that end user doesn't even know about, the encoders, the compression, the up and the down link and the hops and the black air, oops, sorry, that we have to deal with, all is about brand protection, but as well the budget constraints that we're focused against right now. Because let's face it, as the administration says right now, we're coming on the upside, of the bad economic downturn. In the systems integration area, we've been very profitable, quite honestly, which is great for our company. But, there's some networks that are still budget conscious, even to the point of turning lights out, when the office is in use. So that's the type of infrastructure that we are looking at and that we have to brace ourselves upon, and in order to help them make that workflow more efficient and protect the brand.
Which leads seamlessly into my next question. Good for you. Good for you. And it is that we're going to lift the hood of the car now and actually ask the question, how much of this has been automated and how much are we still doing manually? And what are the automation tools that are beginning to help us out today? And this is, I think we could have a very long talk around this point, so let's see where this goes. Let's start with an automation company. Joel, you're in the business of automating, so.
Absolutely. Well, let's say that we're in the business of making automation happen and make it more effective as well. A lot of these processes clearly have not been automated, certainly not to the extent that organizations have been looking for them to be automated. There are people involved, individuals, making decisions, pushing buttons, doing what's required across the entire spectrum. And I don't know that short term that there's really going to be any way to get around that. I think that you're going to see that there's going to be automation of components, but in terms of automation of the overall workflow, there will certainly be automation aids. We like to think in terms of automation tools that we offer one of them. But the fact of the matter is that, again, when you're in the situation where you have all of these differing platforms, differing standards, differing audiences that you're trying to address, there's always going to be that human element that has to be involved in order to pull the levers, push the switches, and to make it happen. Is it more automated today than it used to be? Absolutely. I mean, we've been very stringent about that, rather very diligent about that, and I think that organizations that have proven success in that area have been very aggressive in trying to find ways to automate that, but usually it's by shrinking the choices. We're going to specialize in only this or only that, and then in that sense, they're able to automate it because there's less factors that you have to control.
And you and O'Brien both talked about the issue of this has to be done on time and in budget. And of course, the more complexity you add and the more manual tasks you add, that runs right counter to it.
That's exactly right. And
Scope creep.
So how do you square that circle?
Well, that's where you have to figure out ways to, as they say, and I know it's a cliche, do more with less. And that's where...
Work smarter, not harder.
Work smarter, not harder. Exactly. So organizations are finding ways, in many ways, to outsource some of this, to make the decision-making process go out to organizations that do specialize, or they're trying to find new areas of revenue in order to help fund their ability to make some of these processes smoother. You can look at various different ways of doing that. At some point or another, that comes to the discussion of whether the non-digital versus the digital content ways can be monetized in different ways, and what type of audiences you're trying to address. But at the end of the day, it's a challenge that everybody is trying to face. How do you have these constraints placed upon you in terms of the resources and still at the same time be able to optimize them? And again, there are ways you can do that, there are systems you can use to do that, and as efficient as you can be in terms of coordinating those individuals who are pulling all the buttons and the automated processes around them, the more effective you can make those processes and embrace them, the more feasible it's going to be for you to overcome those revenue challenges and cost constraints. As I said, we like to think we offer one of those ways, but that's the plug part. We won't worry about that.
Let's jump over to you, because you're down in the trenches actually doing it every day, and talk about this issue of how much is automated, how much is manual, and how do we move from one more to the other?
As I was thinking about that, my brain jumped all the way back to nearly 15 years ago, right, when we were trying to edit, still on tape, for multiple networks, the same exact thing. So how manual was that process of doing the same thing over and over to have a physical copy of something to go out on a different network? That was very manual. There was no way to really automate that until we got into the server and digital environment. So we have moved forward drastically in that arena. Our users, our editors, our journalists, they don't want to be doing the simple button pushing things that they have to do over and over again. When we publish to the web currently, there's 32 flavors of still frames that have to be captured to go out on all the different devices. We've automated that to where they only have to do one. They only have to find one keyframe shot, and then the automation in the background sends it out. They used to have to size and recrop each one of those for all the flavors that they went out. That was not an enjoyable task. You know, that was not something that somebody wanted to do 32 times for everything that they edited. So to find places to enhance the workflow, to take out the redundant tasks, the things that are not going to really enhance the product for every user, that's definitely something that we're trying to do. The more we can take tools into the hands of everyday users, that is exceptionally helpful, because everyone's a talented journalist. You're talking about the next generation coming up. They've been shooting and editing since they were 10, right? They know this stuff, they know how to do it, they want to do it. So the more we can get those things in their hands and help them contribute, we can change how we do our overall workflow. So we've automated some things, we've changed it, but there's still a lot of editorial involvement. There's still a lot of times where it is manual and those processes, but you take it one step at a time. What drives the operator crazy that they have to do over and over again, you look to remove that first. What makes sense to automate in the process? We've made some good steps forward with CNN because we have a centralized workflow where we can kind of distribute simultaneously to everyone the same flavor. The hard part is bringing it in. From my vantage point, when we're trying to FTP in or bring in content from stringers who are all sending us something in their own format and having to convert it. That's a very manual process. Some of it we can automate because we know the primary flavors that come in, and then the rest of it, we have to sit there and do a manual process, send through a device, and change it to something that we can use and edit. So we tackle those a little at a time and say, what's causing the most pain right now? And how do we get that so that the user doesn't have to spend a lot of human intervention on it? One thing we're not talking about is media management, right? Servers have gotten to be cheap enough that they can be large enough to hold enough content, so I'm not struggling with server space every minute of the day, which really helps to automate. You can put business rules around those types of things so that you can free somebody up to go do something more enjoyable, more editorial in the work that they're trying to do. So you take those steps a little at a time and work with the industry tools that are out there to help you move there. So it's little bits that become automated or become available due to the changes in technology.
Playing that back to what you just said, so what I took out of that was that the contribution end of your work is where editorial, judgment needs to be exercised in making everything ultimately the same. And once you get it into your workflow system, at that point, there is an opportunity to start deploying automation.
Absolutely, because we bring in all of our content on the same XD, HD format that we use, the XDCAM format, we can process it in different areas of the organization. Once it is in the same format, it's easy to move around. When it's in a different format, it is a challenge, right? And we look for the automation tools on the different side of it. Even on the website, I mentioned the 32 flavors. There's more than that actually for the video that has to go out to our syndication partners when we send content to them. So we move those things out to the outside and keep the production as homogeneous as possible.
Well, Brian, of course, as a service provider, you're in the position of you can't make decisions about we're going to do it this way because you've got clients and they have their own ideas about how they're going to do it. So how much in your operation has to be done, still to be done manually, and perhaps always will, and where can you find efficiencies with automation?
Well, it's a good question. Being that we're a best-of-breed provider, solutions-based for the networks, the high and the low networks, number-wise that we deal with, and listening to the comments here, I was going through my mind thinking about the automations systems and the manual systems, and I'd say literally it's about 50-50. 50% automated and still 50% manual. More on the intake side is it manual, just because, as what you were saying, all of the different formats and all the different flavors are the essence of that media that you have to deal with, and it's just impossible. Now, what you were saying, Robert, yes, networks have their idea of how to do things because it's for the most part, it's historically based. Well, if it worked good this way, let's continue to do this. Why break something that's still working? But when you're still dealing with an analog tape format or an automation system that hasn't been upgraded, when then you can take that same rev or a newer rev of an automation system and then take that essence of that media and then provide it to the 15 platforms that you're trying to play to, you've just opened up new ad revenue sales that you normally wouldn't have. So it's an education opportunity that we provide to that customer segment. It's not necessarily going in and saying, no, this doesn't work. Here's what you really need to do.
That always works very well in a sales situation.
Right. Well, as you came to us and did that, we're like, oh yeah. But no, all kidding aside, it's literally an education process based on what you see out in the marketplace. And there are content distribution management systems out there. We know what they are, and they work very well. It's just which one you would like to go with, and it's the fear of unknown going from one platform to the other.
As the classical musicians say, if it isn't Baroque, don't fix it. Sorry. Greg, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
On that pun, I get the last word. So I'll run through an example for retransmission to tablets of live broadcast. And in our world, we're delivering the ad, the programmer and operator are selling those, let's say at a CPM of somewhere between $30 and $60 a thousand. So the cheaper we can facilitate the delivery and the measurement of that, the more margin they have on it. So there's a lot of pressure to automate. And an example in retransmission is we partner with an encoding appliance company that the signal goes into the appliance, 4 different bit rates and resolutions come out of it. All of that goes up into the cloud. But there's a real critical step that's taking place there. When that signal is coming into the appliance, what it's also picking up on is tones. So it's picking up on a SETI35 tone, and it's saying in real time, hey, there's an ad break, a linear commercial ad break coming up in 8 seconds. They message us. We get that ad decision, and this is particularly relevant for local avails, because now you have this national, let's say it's a Turner or CNN feed, but there's going to be national spots in there, but there might be hundreds and hundreds of local avails that would have been in a traditional model delivered out of the head end, right? But now this is out of one data center. And so what our technology does is gets the tone, figures out the DMA or the jurisdiction for it, and then delivers the local avail that's specific to that and measures it back. And so, but all of that was automated and really hinged heavily off of this encoding appliance. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but it's Inlet Technologies. They were just bought by Cisco, but they detect this tone and message it to us, which is that's just pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I think it's really cool.
It saves us work too. To have to go in and mark the commercial breaks to put it out for a VOD, to not have to go in and put a time code in that says break 1 here to here, break 2, break 3. And so that definitely saves us time.
That's a good point too, because that was a live stream, but the second it was finished, it became the VOD asset. Right. And all the marks are already in there. So we're really working to have zero intervention on that asset.
Very interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about facilities, if you will, or systems. Is the requirement to service an expanding number of media formats and distribution paths, is it changing how the content is actually being developed and how production facilities are designed? And if so, in what ways? Because it's got to be, it can't be your grandfather's broadcast center anymore. Who wants to, go ahead, Bill Ryan.
Sure. Yes. The bottom line, one word. Yes, production facilities. It used to be, what content do we have? Now how can we produce it? And then how do we develop it? That's still, in general terms speaking, of the process workflow, but some of the newer entities that we're working with at Globecomm, we're kind of taking the backwards approach, which is a good way of saying, okay, this is the in aggregate result. In other words, here's what we want the end user to see. That life cycle of that end user product could be just under 5 years, depending on what that network is. But then working that process backwards to, okay, here's the nearline server. Oh, wait a minute, here's the essence as it goes out to the tablets, to the droids, to all of that TV Anywhere model. And then working literally going up the workflow to the editing system, to the studio, to the transmission and transport stream. All of those things definitely play a significant role in that output. But I think programmers, if you will, and ad insertions and ad revenue sales, they're looking at monetizing that new workflow stream. Us as a systems provider, how can we basically lower that cost, and again doing it on time, but then more importantly monetizing that revenue stream. So to answer, yes, I think they're taking the industry is taking a different look at it, because it's not your grandfather's RCA system anymore, but again, it's how can we get that one essence or that one media to multiple platforms and do it effectively and efficiently.
How does that look from your point of view? I mean, how is it changing? Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of these companies. How do you think they're changing how they develop content and even facilities based upon the capabilities that your company provides?
I mean, I'll just give an example around the media agencies. So one thing, when they produce that car spot and they spent $4 or $7 million on it, they want to get as much possible value out of that as they can. So on one hand, that's the 30-second television spot, and so why not just put it right here? And there is a case for that. The part that's missing there, and some of the more interactive agencies or the more forward-thinking ones are finding ways to enhance that experience as well. The really forward-thinking ones are purposing the spot. So when they're doing that, so they know out of that $7 million shot or shot for the 30-second spot, they also had booked the time to shoot the alternate spots for the alternate devices that are in support of. And that kind of gets back to your point earlier, that it's really about enhancing the experience by knowing who the audience is, the device type, and really the context in which they're consuming your content. And the brands, that's not lost on the brands. We're not there yet. I would say maybe 10% of all of the advertising that is making its way here has been purposed for it. They put the pressure on us to find ways that they can do incremental enhancements without having to reinvent the whole workflow and the whole wheel.
Ashley, how's it changing your shop over there?
It makes it simpler overall. Well, for some pieces, because it's the same workflow, right? We hope it's the same workflow, and that's our end goal. We have some parts that we still have to work on. We also have a language channel at CNN Espanol, right? So how do we get the translation out? What do we do for the same content that we have to move through? The goal is to be able to have users and workers be wherever they need to work on the same platform of content. So that makes it a little bit simpler. Yes, it does change the overall dynamics of what we have, but it makes us collaborate more. It makes us talk to our partners more effectively to figure out what it means to the downstream news source user as we send content out to them, wherever it's going to go. The simple part of it is because we're trying to make sure we're speaking the same common language. And if we don't speak the same common language in what we're doing, it will be hard. And so as long as we stay collaborative in our approach, communicate with all the partners that we need to work with within we've got a large organization, but as long as we stay within that, we can move people around, their careers can be enhanced and things along those lines as well. So that's why I say it's a little bit simpler. It doesn't look like the newsroom of the past because you have editing stations that are not only in a closed-off editing suite, right? You can be editing at your workstation just with a PC or a Mac at your workstation. So it changes the look and the feel of the newsroom, but because we use the same platform, it's more helpful.
I bet if I asked you that question 10 years ago, you'd give a different answer, because it struck me as you were talking that the reason it's simpler is that everything's digital already.
Yes.
If we weren't there, however, this would be, well, we wouldn't be doing it, would we?
No, well, we still have to move content, and moving content can be slow and cumbersome sometimes. You know, it can cause jams, you can clog a system, you can get things lined up in a queue and they don't move fast enough for you because news is now, right? We know you've already heard it on your mobile device. If we don't get it to you fast enough, you're not going to be interested. So that is the challenge that we face in doing that. So in a digital environment is how do you differentiate all of those audiences, knowing that you're seeing it every moment here, and what does it look like differently for you? So that's the challenge.
I'd add to that too, that I think there's been a cultural shift in how vendors interact with the operators and the broadcasters, in that you come to us and say, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and we're also trying to solve those problems as well. Whereas maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it's like, here's how it's done, and an RFP would go out, and that's what it would be.
Right.
And now I think we're finding that that internal communication you spoke of is going out into the kind of the industry as a whole.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think time. So everything has to be solved so fast, and it's not going to get solved if it's going to be top down or bottom up. So I don't think the industry can wait for someone to invent something that solves everything, because that's not happening. And there's good ideas out there.
It's very interesting because this parallels other conversations I've had about how we're all listening to each other better. Maybe we're growing up. Who knows?
I don't know if I go
Joel,
that far.
I'll turn to you for the last word on this in terms of how you see your customers and clients changing their process for developing content, their process and their facilities for it.
Well, actually, I think I could probably underline what Ashley said, that, again, when you look at the pressures that are on you to deliver quickly, to deliver on time, to deliver as cost effectively as possible, the key does come down to workflow. And what you then need to do is you try to standardize that workflow as much as possible, and all of the variable elements, the type of target platforms, the type of formats and all the rest of that, you try to make that modular so that if you can standardize your workflow to the extent that 80% of it, I don't know that anybody ever gets to that stage, 80% of it is going to be the same, regardless of whether you're sending something out to a smartphone or whether it's going to be up on your big HD screen, then you've obviously been able to make more efficient the costs that are involved in getting to that place. You know, the example I gave before of the Apple advertisement is a different type of situation, because there you had essentially a different campaign. Well, the same campaign, but content that was specifically tailored to the specific medium that they wanted to address, which was the banner-like advertisement. Under most circumstances, though, if you've got content that you want to put out, particularly if it's commercial content, then you...
He's almost gone. Just hang on.
It's heading that way.
Is that the beer?
I hope so.
But
this is the second time today, so it's twice a day. We'll all learn to live with that. Please proceed.
But again, as much as you can make efficient that workflow, keep it as standard as possible, and then when you get to the point where you have to divert, you then have some sort of intelligent way to be able to say, go this path as opposed to that path. That's how you can control your costs. But of course, then you have to manage that entire process. And there's a lot of thought work that goes into being able to build a workflow that is that standardized, and not everybody has either the corporate discipline or, for that matter, the time to be able to do it.
And by this is like housework. By the time you get it all done, somebody comes along and pours dirt on your floor again. So,
yeah.
Questions or comments from out here? Because we don't want this just to be a monologue or a quadruple log or a quintuple log up here. At any point, just raise your hand. We'll be happy to bring you into the conversation. Greg, you had made the point that we're all listening to each other more because we don't have a choice.
That wasn't exactly what I said.
Well, but I think that's close, though, because we only do things when we have no choice. To what extent is this shifting, do you think, the balance that's occurring inside content production companies between doing it all themselves, keeping it all in-house, and increasingly relying on outside companies to really be value providers to the process? Because traditionally, broadcast has wanted to control everything itself because it cares about its product. But I find that balance to be shifting. So how much do you think? What kind of impact is this particular topic of Media 2.0 having on that balance? How about in your shop, Ashley? I mean,
that's a tough one. I don't know. Give me the tough question first on that.
You want me to come back to you?
Yeah, let me think.
Okay, we'll
on
come
it.
back to you. Okay, so let's go to somebody who can profit from this, like you. So what are you seeing in terms of that willingness to outsource fundamentally key value-adding segments in this area versus, again, doing it all inside?
Well, we see this very cyclical because internally, and as a former Turner Broadcast employee, I can remember when production was valued as an outsourced cost, and all of the production went out of house. But now with the efficiencies that we're seeing in the broadcast industry, you know, and Ashley promptly said, being able to, you know, use an editing platform either on your PC or Mac at your cube or in your office, and then able to, you know, render that and shuttle it off to your, you know, offline storage system. A lot of those efficiencies are actually enabling networks to lower the cost, monetize on that efficiency, and bring things back in. That being said, there are still networks out there that do a majority of outsourcing, and that's, you know, basically, you know, part of our niche, where we do help them, but then also internally on that same process to show them how to monetize and make more efficient that internal workflow. Because the days of, you know, those editing systems, and we know what they are long gone, albeit the, you know, the PC-based or, you know, PC server-based systems where you have one multicolored keyboard and one screen that then, you know, sends off to a tape-based format or to a nearline storage system. You know, they're still prevalent, but, you know, we're seeing a lot more efficient systems come into the industry itself.
I love the nostalgia with which you say that. Joel?
I would say that, you know, as far as our clients are concerned, it is probably the top topic that they are grappling with, because, you know, in the old days, you had a master. You knew where it was physically. The issue of outsourcing really didn't come up that often because your tape would go out the door and you'd see it back in 2 weeks. With digitization of content, you know, this is not news to anybody. All of a sudden, you can have work being done. You can have work being done anywhere on the globe, and it is being done anywhere on the globe. You can have it being done simultaneously in production and in post-production in particular as well. The work can follow the sun. The original content producer, let's say, can be in Los Angeles. It's being worked on simultaneously in London and Mumbai. And the real trick then becomes, again, that workflow issue of coordinating all of those disparate pieces that are not then happening just down the next corridor. It is an opportunity because by having it being worked on along those lines, there are certain things you can do in terms of cost containment, in terms of budgeting, in terms of being able to utilize resources that may be more effective than the individual that might be down the corridor, might be more cost effective than the person who's down the corridor. But at the same time as well, there is this massive infrastructure now that you have to build around it in terms of being able to coordinate it, manage it, make sure that everything is going as it should. So it's like everything else in life, there's always a trade-off. But in terms of the drive towards it, we've certainly seen that it's ongoing, and it's becoming more and more prevalent as every hour goes by.
Greg, of course, your business is probably doing something that they can't do for themselves. But how do you see this transforming the balance?
I guess I can maybe give two examples. One is we're a new enabling technology, so they do come to us because they're just not where we're at yet, and so I guess that's good for us at this stage in the overall life cycle. But an example though that we're seeing in the marketplace is, let's say a year and a half ago, most of the broadcasters that were taking our player SDK and putting it into their iOS apps to enable ad delivery, mid-roll ad delivery, I don't know, 90%, if not 100% of those would be it would go to a design or an app development boutique that was engaged by the broadcaster. They didn't have that talent in-house. And now we're seeing just the reverse. Probably 80% of the deployments of our SDK it's with our core customer, the programmer or the broadcaster, but they've built out their internal app development team. And I think there's kind of two drivers that we've seen there. One is, you know, as soon as it all came out, everyone and their dog put up a sign saying that we do apps, and there was a lot of spin, and you know, big, you know, publicly traded media companies where you, oh my God, I'm beholden to someone who can't deliver now. That's not all the case. There's some phenomenal app boutiques out there. The other is, I think they brought it into their production and their workflow culture. They've got a new opportunity. We have to build out the app. It's very media centric, and you know, a lot of that expertise isn't in the marketplace. And they invested in, you know, Android and iOS and other app development teams, or they re-educated their existing, perhaps more Flash-based web experience guys and gals.
Okay, Ashley, now you've had some time to think.
I did.
So what do you say?
Brilliant answer coming. Now, when I think of outsourcing and file formats, one of the biggest things that I think of that we've had to embrace, and I think we were early adopters of it, was all the things that the people in the whole wide world shoot, right? And the projects that they edit and what they can contribute and give to us. So that was outsourcing, really. When you think about how we used iReports and what we did to say, we're going to embrace the person that's on the scene that's going to be able to give us the content. That was the first foray into the formats. It creates a problem with getting it all in-house and transcoding and things along those lines. But that also changes how we do our business, and that's outsourcing our journalism to a large extent, right? It also outsources how we tell the news. It brings that piece out there. It also does where we let our videos live. Do we want our content to live on a YouTube platform, right? So we have a channel there. We have a channel on Vimeo. Do we really want them to go there? So we're outsourcing who we distribute to with what we do in our overall workflow. So being the early adopter of that, and not only just what they shoot, but we've also started to, just of a news scene, the fire, the crash, things along those things, but we've also started saying people do some really great productions in their own time, that they're not true editors for a company. They're just putting a story out there that's really wonderful, and we want to be able to help the whole world experience this piece of content that's really neat. So we have to bring in that content and say, they don't work for us, but we're going to put something out there that's different journalism. Do we have our standards that go by it? So when I think of that, that's what I think of with platforms and outsourcing and file format. And I definitely agree with Joel, the Sun process, because we have recently gotten all of our platforms in sync with what we do from an editing format. We can now start that. We are just in the evolution of how do we take advantage of where something is edited, where the Sun is in the day. So that's something we're moving forward to right now, but it's definitely where we see it going.
Actually, I think Ashley brought up a really good point as well about outsourcing, where it's coming from as well. I know CNN, of course, with your iReporters have been very aggressive in that area. Some of our other clients, without mentioning any names, that are also news gathering agencies, you have this kind of dichotomy because you have some people who have spent a career doing very tightly produced content, and they feel that part of their new competition is consumer generated content.
Absolutely.
You know, sometimes it's people who have the same type of editing and manipulation tools that people have been using up until recently only in professional hands.
Right.
But others are, you know, how are we supposed to, you know, why do people really want to watch something that somebody just took the dumbest of smartphones and just recorded? And nonetheless, if the content, the pure content, the core content, the story is compelling enough, then yeah, that's something that people want to see.
I'm also going to guess that there's a limit to your ability to outsource workflow because of the news cycle. You've got to get it done so fast, there's no time for it. I'm afraid we have run out of time, in spite of the fact that I have more questions, and you may have more questions, but if so, they're not going to run away immediately, so you can grab hold of them. I hope you will join me in thanking very much I don't want to mess up these names, so I'm going to flip to my cheat sheet here to make sure I get everybody, do justice to them. I hope you will join me in thanking Joel Nirenberg, O'Brien McKinley, Greg Philpott, and Ashley Blackmon for a very interesting hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.